Hello, my name is Leslie Connor, and I am joined here today with Jason Sizemore, and we are happy to have Lindz McLeod with here today. Lindz is the author of The Immortal Game, which is in the newest issue of Apex Magazine. My name is Leslie Connor, and I am joined here today
yet. I don't think it is.
Yeah. I don't think it is. So we're gonna have to be super careful about spoilers today.
Okay.
But we are here tonight for another Apex Happy Hour, and we are so happy to have you here to join us. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump into our conversation?
Sure, and thank you very much for having me. This is so exciting. So I'm a Scottish writer, an occasional poet as well. I write a wide kind of variety of things. I am currently broadcasting this from a hotel room in England as I'm starting my PhD. Ironically, tomorrow morning, it is now 1 a.m. here, so this is going to be a really fun induction morning for me.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't even care if I even sleep after this. And I'm really excited that Apex decided to publish The Immortal Game, because it was a story that really meant a lot to me in several different levels. So yeah, it'll be interesting to talk about spoilers, but I'm really excited for people to read it, and I hope everyone likes it.
I have to say that it's one of the stories that truly got the Slush team and everyone talking, because without revealing too much, it's an interesting story that kind of intertwines chess moves and another type of game that's kind of going on. And so it was like this question, it was like, we love this story, but none of us are chess masters. So we were like, does the chess work? Which is why eventually I had to come back to you while we were still in like the Slush phase, and I'm like, so.
Yeah, and I have to admit, I'm not very good at chess. I like it a lot, but I'm very bad at it. I just really enjoy like the idea of like the potential of the game, like the possibilities. There are just so many. And with this particular story, I'd always wondered if I could structure something entirely in chess moves from a real game. And when I stumbled across one particular game, I thought, actually, with the character that I had in mind, could this maybe work? And as I started to write it, I felt, the magic, you get in the zone, and it took me maybe half an hour and it was done. Almost as you see it, pretty much, with very little editing. It all kind of came out in one burst. And I assumed that was the end of it also. And I was supposed to be writing another book for my agent, which I still haven't written. And my fiance said to me, I really like this story. What happens next? And I said, nothing, it's just a story. And she was like, but if something was to happen, what would happen? And I was like, well, if I write you a sequel, will you leave me alone so that I can write the book that I'm supposed to? And she was like, yeah, I will. I was like, okay, don't make this like a kid at bedtime with another glass of milk. I'm like, okay, one more story. So I wrote the sequel, and then I realized, oh no, I actually quite like this. And while convincing myself that I was going to write another book any day now, I actually ended up writing the whole thing, the whole novel. And one of the things that I really loved about it was when I wrote The Immortal Game and I, structured it in those chess pieces, the moves, I wondered, it's the kind of thing that is a nice conceit to set up the beginning of a novel. But what if I did something like that for every single chapter all the way through? How inventive could I be? Because I really liked the magic of what was happening within that story. And I thought it was really interesting and added like a different layer. You don't have to be a chess grandmaster to understand it. Like there's human interaction going on there that I think we all can understand on different layers. And so for the rest of the book, I was doing other things like that. Like one chapter is a recipe. It's a real recipe. You can make the cake along with the character if you want to. And it's like a recipe from his the region that he's from in Eastern Europe. And there's various other things as well. And I really thought, like, my agent's going to hate this. She's going to be like, this is another one of your weird ideas. And actually, yeah, she loved it. So I was wrong. I was very wrong and happy about it.
Because, you know, you told me before this that you had written a novel based in this world.
Yeah.
And immediately I'm like, ooh, because there's so many possibilities that are laid out in the Immortal game that I'm kind of like, I'm interested. I can't wait until you can send me a tweet and be like, hey, it's published, so I can grab it, because I want to see, like, how does this evolve? Because again, I'm going to talk around the plot, but there's different characters and worlds that are sort of alluded to that we don't see a whole lot of in the story, obviously, because it's a short story. But it's just wonderful, the possibilities that you left there, which I think is one of the reasons the story excited everybody behind the scenes at Apex when it was still under consideration. I mean, there was a lot of chatter going back and forth about the story, and I was like, okay, I've been sitting on this story for a while. I just need to make sure, you know, does everything work out as beautifully as I think it does? And like you said, you don't have to be a chess master or understand chess, because I mean, I was taught chess in elementary school. That's my level of experience, but I still love the story. I still understood what was going on in the story, which is what I think makes it so wonderful. And I'm excited to see what readers' reactions are to it.
Can you tell us when the novel comes out and who's the publisher?
It hasn't gone out on submission yet.
Oh, okay.
Because my agent and I generally agree, but she wanted a little more angst in a certain area. And she also was like, oh, you know, I know you've made it quite creepy. Feel free to dial that up. Her level of tolerance for creep is much higher. And I keep thinking, you know, but I've tested this on my friends and they're all very scared of me now. So are you sure? Like, I can do it, but like, you know, I want you to sleep at night. And she's always like, no, just like go full hog on it. So there were some things that I have in the novel that I thought, wow, this is really, it's hard to fall asleep when I remember that I wrote this and maybe I need another shower because I don't quite feel clean. But yeah, we were tweaking some bits here and there. And as you say, like, I think the allusion to other characters in that first story was something that really interested me as well, because when I also I teach writing courses and workshops, and I also coach as well. And so one of the things that I'm talking about in the workshop that I'm doing just now is, you know, if you're kind of writing that long form work and you're kind of stuck, people often find it quite hard to create like fleshed out secondary characters, which I think is something that can really make or break a story. And one of the things I always say is like, have you considered taking that secondary character and writing a short story from their point of view of an event that your main character will never find out about? This is a secret between you and them. And it makes them feel fuller. I've kind of stolen it from Meryl Streep, but I stand by it. I think she said something like she gives her character, whoever it is, a secret that she like holds. And I thought I really liked that idea, but it also means that, you know, your universe is also a little bit more fleshed out as well. Just because your main character isn't seeing it happen doesn't mean it didn't happen. That's not what life is like. You know, people aren't just NPCs that kind of walk in and out of our universe. It makes it feel like that. So the other characters that are mentioned in the story, I thought, though they are very different from the Daisy, who is the main character of the Immortal game. They have very different motivations for doing the kind of thing that the Daisy is doing, and they handle similar situations very, very differently. So it's kind of nice to see they're not necessarily good or bad people. They are people in a difficult situation who are doing what they can to survive. Sometimes with some relish and sometimes with resignation.
Yeah, that's something about the story that that I really enjoyed, is because you don't wrap up exactly what's happening in a nice, neat little bow. Like, you leave some pieces where the reader can like think about it and try to work it out, and maybe read it again and be like, wait a second, this isn't, because I thought I knew what was going on. And then at the end, I'm like, wait, wait a second. And so, yeah, I would love, I can't wait until I'm sure your novel will get out there and get published, and then I get to read it.
I'll send it to you anyway if we ever decide on those final tweaks. I will happily send it over. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it sounds really interesting. I love the way you set things up in the story, and when you said you had a novel based off of it, I was very excited to hear that, because it's such a rich world in such a short amount of words.
Yeah, for me, the story, what I found most striking about it was the depth of character. The story is pretty short. It's like 2,300 words, 2,400, something like that. And it's not often that you'll see a fully realized world and characterization and a relatively complex plot for a short story in that word count. And the first time I read it, I was very impressed. And it was one of those stories that Lesley shoved at me and said, read this now. And whenever she does that, I know that we've got something good on our hands. Tell me a little bit about the process that you underwent to make the chess metaphor into more than just a metaphor, how it turned into like how you structured your story, because there's a basic story structure, and you had to kind of wedge that into this relatively famous in chess circles chess match. Can you talk about that process a little bit?
Yeah, so when I first looked up the moves, I kind of had this idea in my head that I had wanted to do something like this, but I didn't quite know what. And I think that's probably what makes me a really bad chess player, but maybe a better writer, hopefully, because I can see the path, but it's always more interesting for me if I just deviate from it a little bit, just to see what happens. In chess, you can't mulligan it, you can't go back and like erase your progress, but in a story you can wander off somewhere and see if it works. And there's no path that I won't tread occasionally just to see what will happen. So when I first kind of had this idea, I thought, as much as the queen is the most sort of powerful piece on the board in terms of like where she can move, she can do almost anything. She can go anywhere. There's no kind of limitations to what she can do. And she's always protecting the king. And it just sort of felt like if I set it in a particular period as well, this almost kind of before Mad Men-esque, but like kind of 1920s, because I'm quite a fan of like American the 1920s, as well as like Prohibition and stuff going on in that area. It's quite interesting for me. So I had this idea that I kind of knew what the club would look like, and I kind of knew what the vibe was going to be like, but ultimately at that point in time, and arguably forever, women have been kind of relegated to, if they have power, it has to be connected to or protecting something about men. And when you think of the king, like he cannot do much, but he is the only piece on the board that can really force the end of the game. So in a sense, he decides whether everyone lives or everyone dies. And I kind of thought, you know, this power dynamic, and I had actually been doing a zine for the Daily Drunk, a Buffy zine, and it had made me think of, you know, when Buffy first came out, you know, Joss Whedon had said that he'd wanted to do like a subversion of this traditional horror trope where, you know, the young blonde girl actually turns around and fights the monster instead. And I thought, what if we're seeing this girl who on the surface is really naive, and in any other story might be the one who is being taken advantage of, and no matter how much you kind of think she's aware of it, there's always a monster, there's always something. But what if she is really kind of the monster here? What if everything she does is calculated, very, very calculated? And how much does that make her, you know, how much power does that give her? But also how much does that mean she's kind of buying into what she has to do? So once I started kind of Googling famous games, and I wasn't really sure what I was looking for, but then I stumbled across the Kasparov-Topalov game, and I thought, oh, it's really interesting that the White Queen kind of has the upper hand from the start, and you kind of don't really realize until later what's going on. And I thought, yes, I like that idea. I like that everything she's observing and thinking is very self-aware, even from the very first line where she's thinking about it. She's like doing her hair to go out, and if I can quote it, I don't know if that's a spoiler.
Yeah.
But she's describes her curls as each the perfect size to fit on a man's ring finger. And I was like, oh, this says so much. You know, she's already thinking, even as she dresses, and that's true throughout the rest of the book as well. Whenever she has a point of view chapter, she's always thinking about the appearance of what she is rather than what she actually is. The mask very rarely slips, and when it does, it's quite shocking in a way, but she's very concerned with doing things in a very calculated way. She's not someone who likes to make spontaneous gestures. She's very kind of Anya Taylor-Joy and Queen's Gambit a little bit, but just way scarier, I think.
Yeah, I loved the way that it was so calculated, and you can, after you get to the end, I love those stories that I read in the slush that I get to the end and I immediately want to start over, because then, you know, I have the knowledge and you can see how all the pieces fit so perfectly together. And this is one of those stories that it's like you get to the end and it's kind of revealed, and immediately I'm like, aha, now I need to go back. See, how did Lindz make this all work?
Yeah, pick up all the little hints and subtle references.
Yeah, and those are like the best thing to find in a short story. You know, in a novel, it's harder because it's longer, and I don't know about you, but I don't usually get to the end of the novel and then immediately want to read it over again. But with short fiction, I find those stories where I'm like, oh, everything clicked into place. Yeah. Perfectly. I love to go back and immediately reread it to just see how's it fit, how's it working together. And this was one of those stories where you know, the Daisy knows every step of the way what she's doing and what the reaction to what she's doing will be, which is just chef's kiss. Beautiful.
And one of the things that I like so much about the character is, you know, I really like this kind of analytic, calculated, a little bit cold, hiding something less cold underneath, but like intensely rational character who's like, well, I'm going to do the thing and here's all the possibilities and I've thought about each one of them and I sort of have a plan for each of them, and I've done this enough times that I know how it's going to go. It's kind of second nature. But I know what you mean about like reaching the end of a short story and wanting to go back and like, and one of the reasons I really like this, and I try to do that in my work, because I kind of I want it to have reread value as well, but I kind of try and always put in little things so that on a second read you're going to go, oh wait, actually, armed with the knowledge that I have at the end, now this makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
It's something that I really enjoy doing, and like, so even and it also gave me a chance to put in not just like the chess moves specifically, like the notation, but there's like a couple of little facts about chess in there as well, and the one about the bishop. When I found that, I was like, oh, this is exactly what I needed, and I know exactly where to put it and what to do, and I was so excited. And actually, like, the few people that had read it before I'd started sending it out had said to me like, oh hey, is that true? And I was like, it's a real thing. But coming from this character, I can see why you might not believe it in that moment. You know, she would say anything if it achieved her aim, so I can kind of see why you would think like, but really. So yeah, but that is a real fact about that particular piece, and it also ended up being, for me, like, that's one of the scariest parts of the whole story.
So good.
Nah.
So what is, like, you said you're obviously you're working with an agent and you're getting ready to start your PhD, which is amazing. So how do you find time to write, and what does your writing routine? I hate to use the word routine because a lot of people are like, well, how does that work?
Yeah, no, it's complete chaos. Yeah, no, I have no defense for any of it. I have a very understanding partner who is like, oh, you're in the zone? Okay, we will just eat whatever I can find for dinner then. And yeah, she's very sweet and very kind. She's also a writer, so she understands. But it was, I have to admit, like, last year was really difficult because we had just bought a house, which took all of the money that I had planned to spend on my PhD. So then I had to take another job and was doing more freelance. So I was basically working 3 jobs last year to save up enough money to quit my job and do this PhD. And I was still writing, and that's also when I wrote this novel as well. So it was a very, very accidental novel. I cannot stress how much I really didn't mean to write it, and I almost didn't want to write it in a way, but it was kind of happening to me. And I just sort of fell in love with it and couldn't stop myself. But I will have ideas, and I just keep like a running list of strange ideas that may be useful at a later date. I was browsing Reddit yesterday and I found a picture of how to identify different swords, and I thought, yeah, that'll be useful at some point. Maybe not now, but like 3 weeks from now, I might go, hey, actually, like, what's the difference between like a longbow and a long sword and something else? And I gave it like a couple of hours, and then I thought, actually, I kind of know that I want to use that in something else. So really, it's just like coming up with ideas. I rarely hear, like, I know it's always like this trope in movies where writers will say, if only I had an idea. And I'm like, I know no writers who say that. Writers have ideas, they just don't have time. And if I could pause time, I would use it to write all the time. Like, I would never do anything else. Basically, I just had to sacrifice like doing a lot of other things, and it was easier kind of during COVID because I was on my own and I didn't really have anything else to do, and I'm a terrible workaholic at the best of times, so I wrote like a huge amount during that period, but I just really enjoy it. And even when I'm reading or I'm doing something else, I'm always kind of thinking about writing. I'd already told my partner that in addition to doing the PhD this year, I was planning to write like 3 other books.
Wow.
I still would like to. It's a bit ambitious even for me, maybe, but I should probably write that book that I promised my agent I would write last year eventually. But there's just some ideas that kind of take hold and don't let go. I find it really hard to say no to an idea, I think. And there's something really exhilarating about getting lost in words and, some days are harder than others. Some days, you write 3,000 words and like some of them are good. And other days you write 200 words, but they're all gold. It just differs from day to day, but I always love it. I always love the struggle. It's like climbing mental mountains, I think. It doesn't matter where I'm at the bottom or I'm at the summit. I just love the journey. So
that's so beautiful.
Yeah, that is great. I really enjoy the way you write. It's kind of very poetic. Do you have other short fiction out in the world that, like, if an interested reader editor type wanted to go check it out?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have a website which I've been told looks really intimidating, but in all honesty, it's because I'm not very good at websites. So everything I've ever done pretty much.
Most writers aren't.
Yeah. So my fiance has a really nice one where she's picked like her best things. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that looks confusing. I'm just going to put everything I've done. And then whenever you go there, you can just pick by yourself. It's like a buffet. So I did pretty well for myself over the past year. And I was published in like Catapult and Pseudopod and The Razor, which was my piece there was probably my favorite flash fiction I've ever written. And it was just nominated for best short fictions as well. And I also have been working with Assemble Media over the last year and writing stories that may be hopefully adapted into TV or film at some point. So that's kind of something that I was thinking about also when I was writing this story and writing the subsequent novel, because it was very cinematic in my head. And something that I had to teach myself when I started writing is I realized that I was really bad at description because I could see what was happening in my head and I often forgot that other people couldn't. So I would forget I'd be like, oh, who cares what color the wall is? Like, I can see it. This is what matters. But I kind of trained myself to go back and put that stuff in. But it's very clear to me kind of and I'm just really like transcribing what's in my head. So yes, the answer is I have a website. I actually just had a short collection come out with Bear Creek Press in November called Turducken. It is a matryoshka of literary joy, hopefully, and it features a selection of published pieces and non-published pieces as well. And I love Bear Creek Press, and Stuart, who runs it, is wonderful, and he told me that he thought I was a genius and he would publish anything I sent him. And I was like, I will test that boundary. But he didn't back down. So then we ended up with Turducken. And I also have a novel coming out in April with Brigade's Gate, which is a Disney retelling, but not like I've seen anyone do before. It was the very first novel I ever wrote as kind of part of my master's, and it was really, like a lot of my other novels, it's some idea that takes me and won't let go. And I've always had a bee in my bonnet about how the working class was treated in Beauty and the Beast. Like, it's just not fair. They didn't do anything wrong. Why were they cursed as well? They were furniture. They didn't even answer the door. So I was like, you know what? I'm pretty mad about this. On behalf of the working class in Disney films, why don't I just write a whole novel? So it is pre-curse from the butler's point of view. And then I decided that since Disney had put it in a French village for zero reason, I would also set it at the time of the French Revolution. So you've also got very class warfare going on there as well. So it gets really grim in places. It's very dark, occasionally comedic, but very dark as well.
Maybe the only time I would read anything Disney related.
I think you'd probably be hard pressed at this point to really see the connection. It's a bit more like, did you like Downton Abbey, but would you like to be actually quite scared? And maybe see some murders?
Yeah,
sign me up. For you.
It's interesting.
That sounds great.
Yeah. I promise you, I was going to ask about the cinematic nature of the Immortal game, and I'm very pleased to feel validated in my analysis that you did have an eye on that angle. I was even going to mention that if there are any IP producers, or purchasers watching this, when the Immortal game comes out, I would recommend you read it. It's eminently filmable. I could see it being like a short in an anthology series. Just saying.
I completely agree. No, please pitch on my behalf. I love it. Definitely. And when I eventually send it to my agent, who I have to point out didn't want it in the first place, but I did it anyway. At this point, she probably just puts her head in her hands when she gets an email from me. I don't know. But we had, because we had been working with Assemble over the last year and doing some stories for them and sort of like kind of feeling out different projects, something that I'm like happening that I'm not allowed to talk about just yet, but maybe soon, that hopefully might be a big deal. And she was like, I know that you probably want to traditionally publish this one, but also you know that they're going to love it. And I was like, I know, yes, I think that they will, but also I really do want to traditionally publish this one. And they do have a publishing arm actually, but I would rather go this route because it's not something that I've done yet in my career. So it's definitely a checklist, but also the Immortal game, the novel, was a chance for me to be really poetic. The short story is like a sort of light, it's almost like a tasting menu in a way. There was like elements of that in the very first story, but it gets more and more kind of involved as it goes out. And I think it would be a shame to kind of miss out on some of that language, which wouldn't really translate to the screen. You can actually mark every single time I got hungry while I was writing it, because suddenly the imagery gets really food heavy. There's a point where I describe, one of them, the characters was walking into a bar, and the string quartet is like, it's like porcine and flavor rich, and the cello is smooth and creamy. And I thought, gosh, I am real hungry right and I can always tell. I find it really difficult to like identify that if I'm in the zone, but suddenly I'm writing food imagery. I'm thinking, oh yeah, no, I should take a break sometime.
You're like, it's time to maybe get something to eat.
And there's a lot of different stuff that I kind of went into, but at the same time, I did want the general plot to be pretty cinematic. So there's points where I'm trying not to spoil the original story too much.
It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah. What the Daisy is trying to achieve in the original story becomes difficult to achieve, then impossible to achieve in the novel. And it becomes clear that there's a massive kind of world problem going on there in their world. And they have to kind of find a way to fix that, or else perhaps the world will no longer exist. And I think that's the kind of thing that would be pretty easy to film and also not expensive. Like I've learned this over the last year. They keep saying to me, stop sending us things where people are on the moon. The moon is expensive. And I'm like, I just really want to be in the moon, like, okay, I guess we're going to do another grounded sci-fi. I just really want to be in the moon sometimes. Maybe in a base. Maybe nobody has to be on the moon. No, okay. So I've learned that some things are kind of easier to film, and that Hollywood kind of gravitates towards like certain things, not necessarily period things, but like the glamour, especially like you can see that in the Immortal game, the short story, like the place where the Daisy goes for a drink. It has this vibe of like opulence and something that I think is, it's really interesting to watch. And you see it crop up through like so many different like areas. Like you can see from Mad Men. I recently rewatched Umbrella Academy, and there's a point where they go back to the 50s. and one of the characters is working in a kind of bar like this. It's all red velvet and like jazz singers, beautiful dresses kind of thing. And it's like these times that we keep going back to again and again. We associate that with like kind of F. Scott Fitzgerald, like opulence, that I think I'm really drawn to as well. Although there are other time periods going on. I'm not going to spoil things. Yeah, it's difficult.
It is. The more of these that we do, the more I realize I'm like, wow, it's really hard to talk about a story, but not like spoil it.
Yeah.
To talk around the story. So what, you're starting your PhD tomorrow. What are you studying?
So it's creative writing.
Okay.
So I'm going to the University of Manchester Metropolitan, and I applied with my proposed thesis is about Jose Saramago and the hopefully the connections, both made and broken, in blindness. So I'd really like to like study like intimacy, and not just between like characters who are like romantically or kind of sexually involved, but like the intimacies that can come with having any kind of relationship, not just with other people, but with like locations, like with yourself, with interests, and also like how certain disabilities may or may not play into that as well. Obviously in blindness, you know, the characters are being affected by this particular plague, have lost their sight. Most of the characters have in that place. One of them is hiding it, and that also makes things quite interesting. So I'm both excited and a little concerned, because when I met for the very first kind of interview, they said no one's ever done anything like this before, and they looked very excited, and I thought, should I be a bit worried? Okay, but no, they seem like really excited about the idea, and I really like Saramago. There's a lot to his work that I find really inspiring, and Blindness is one of those novels that you can read it just as a straight novel. It's really interesting. You know, there's action that takes place, there's humanity on display, there's like lots of different things happening, but the fact that he kind of almost blinds the text in a way, so he doesn't use dialogue tags, which when you first start to read, you're like, what is going on? Like, it's just chaos, but you get into the rhythms and it becomes very natural. And by the time you go back to another book, you're thinking, wow, these dialogue tags are just really there. You know, they really separate the dialogue from the characters, from the prose, and it's actually more interesting to me to see like what can be taken out and still be a readable, enjoyable, accessible novel, rather than like what can you put in. I'm kind of more interested in like all the things you can take away, almost like, you know, in poetry when you do kind of like text erasure, like that.
Yeah, blackout poetry. Yeah.
It's been a while since I've read Blindness, but isn't he, at least in that novel, adverse to paragraph breaks as well? Like, yeah. I seem to remember whole chapters just being blocks of text.
Yeah, I started reading it, I want to say it was very early in 2020 when the whole world was chaos, and I was like, I can't do this now. Yeah. So now I'm like, oh no, I need to go back, because
obviously Lindz likes it, but I love it too. It is a very defining novel for me when I read it, like in my late 20s, I think.
Yeah, I think I just tried to read it at the absolute wrong time, and I was like,
it is it's a heavy read too.
It is a heavy read, and I did not need a heavy read at that time. So now you're inspiring me to go and like search on my bookshelves and be like, where are you?
It's good. It's still, you know, like he has the kind of writing that like it just holds up. You know, it's just consistently beautiful, consistently concerned with humanity and in the spectrum of emotions and the ways in which people can behave. And it's not judgmental. It's just And one of the other things that I really like about it is that obviously in Blindness and other things as well, he refers to characters by not their name, but something that they either are, their job title, or something that they have done. So it's like the doctor, the doctor's wife, the thief, who steals a car at the start and then doesn't get very far because he also becomes blind. And that was also something that I had done in my novel that's coming out as well. Like the butler is known as Le Majordome, and the only character who is ever named is dead at the start of the book. Although his death is a horrible ripple effect throughout, and I think that's something that really interests me as well. And when I came to write the Immortal Game, I sort of thought, like, should I drop and should I just call her Daisy? And I thought, no, I hate that idea. She's a role that she's playing, and I think we all need to know it. And calling her Daisy just feels very. Yeah, it feels kind of demeaning for this particular thing. And also the other characters having floral names as well. Not only makes sense for this, but also later in the book when you meet a character called the Lily, who is just a giant thug who never speaks, but he has the prettiest name. But he's probably the most dangerous of all. And I kind of liked that. Assigning those flowers, I was quite particular about them as well, because I kind of thought, maybe she should be the rose, but I thought, again, a rose is too obvious for her. It needs to be something that looks unassuming, innocent, that you could pick it and never have a second thought, and that's how she's seen. So yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, I love the choice of your protagonist's name in the short. The way it juxtapositions with some things the character does. It's a nice contrast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely feel like leaving it as the Daisy rather than Daisy made a measurable impact on how the reader reads the story.
Absolutely.
So yeah, right decision.
There's a formality to it.
Exactly.
And also, like you said, an innocence to the name Daisy.
Mm-hmm.
It's you're just really good at playing with form and like all the little tricks of writing that I think new writers could read story and learn a lot, like little put in their toolbox.
Thank you very much. Like I really appreciate that. And I do I mentor and I coach and teach as well. So like these are the things that I'm always saying, like this is how to write an intro so that you can grab someone's attention. This is how to do the thing. Like, be careful, don't say walked when you could use something else in place of it that would give us like 4 other details about something. Everything should matter. I maybe be a little bit of a trope to say like every word counts, but it really does, especially in something like this where it's a short story. And also I really enjoy playing with form as well. There's honestly no idea so silly that I won't at least try. I recently tried to write something in 5th perspective. Really hurt my brain. But
I saw you tweeting about that, mm-hmm. and I was like, I don't even know what that would look like.
I don't think anyone does, and so no one can really tell me that I'm wrong.
Well, there you go. If you're the first,
exactly,
you can be like, this is what it is.
Yeah, it was interesting because I thought, well, it was just a chance comment made at dinner, and then I thought, actually, what would that look like? Because I have a friend who wrote something in 4th recently that was really good, and I thought, like, yeah, like how far can you kind of push that? And so when I googled it, there were sort of 3 different schools of thought. That was like, okay, you could write something that was kind of a gossip. So it's like, someone's cousin's wife told me, or you could write it as almost like a third person plural, but using like the crowd almost like a shoal of fish, so it's like a very collective thing. Or you could refer to humanity, and I thought, well, okay, those are three very different things. So I thought, well, what could I use to kind of thread all of those perspectives together? And I won't go into it, but the title of the piece so far is Concerning the Photographs Taken Before and After Andrea's Wedding. So hopefully it kind of links everything together in a way that still makes sense, even when it becomes like humanity does this, humanity does that at the very end.
Are you a Ted Chiang fan?
You know, my fiance is, and I still have not really got I really liked Arrival, though. I did see the film. But yeah, she's like always going on about Ted Chiang.
Yeah,
it's like her favorite. And I'm like, I'm sorry,
I'm
really behind on it. Yeah.
His short fiction.
Mm-hmm. We actually have 2 copies of Exhalation. I just haven't read either one of them yet, but I've heard he's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are about 12 minutes from the end of our happy hour. So anybody who is watching live, if you have any questions, now is the time. Any burning questions that we have not covered, or if we have got your head so confused at this point as we talk around the story.
I know, I should never have brought up the 5th person. It confused me as well. So
I think it's amazing though that it like you're willing to say, okay, well, what would this look like? And once you figure out, like, you have kind of an idea of what it would look like, how can you put that into action in a story?
Yeah.
And I think that that's a wonderful way for writers, especially, I mean, I wouldn't sit out and be like, I'm writing a novel in 5th person, but if you're like, I'm writing a short story, it gives you the chance to try something out without a huge time commitment. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if it does work,
exactly,
you're less likely to exhaust both the writer and the reader with these odd POVs and styles
and different things. And like I always say, like, there's, as far as I know as yet, there is no elite group of hackers waiting to break into my laptop or anyone's laptop and post pictures of my bad first drafts anywhere. Like, it's between me and the screen. Nobody needs to know all of the things that didn't work that just lie limply in my Scrivener folder. Like, you know, unconscious starfish. Like, they just stay until they either get revived or they just get pushed down the pile and we just don't think about them anymore, because that didn't make any sense. Oh, okay. So that's a good question. So I was always really interested in writing. I was a voracious reader as a kid. Probably annoyingly so. I was reading Jeffrey Archer at 9, which my parents didn't clock enough to stop. So I was reading like All the President's Men and was not really following a lot of it, but I was reading it. And I first went to university to do psychology, and I realized I didn't really want to do that. And I dropped out and I kind of worked for a while. I had various jobs. I was a cheesemonger at one point. And eventually I thought, you know, in my kind of mid-20s, I thought, well, I've had some life experience and, you know, actually, I think I'd like to start writing again. Like, I don't feel like I'm doing anything with my life, but I do feel like there's something, some talent, something, if I just nurture it, maybe it'll work. So I was working at the time in a job that I only just left in December because the PhD is not compatible with the full-time job, as much as I did consider that. And I was basically like proofreading and editing legal contracts. And I did that job for about 15 years. And during that time, I did my bachelor's and also my master's with the Open University while I was working full-time. So I didn't really have a life, which suits me because I'm boring. And so basically,
you can stay awake through anything then if you made a career reading legal
pretty
content.
much, yeah. Insomnia and workaholism, and yeah. And I don't think it was very good to begin with, to be honest. And that's not the kind of thing that really puts me off, because I'm just really stubborn, which I blame my father for. And I'm always interested in how to improve. So, your praise is wonderful, and I really appreciate it, but I'm never going to be the person who's like, oh, people are telling me I'm great. Well, I'm just great now. That's fine. I can stop. I'm always like, oh, but like, look at, this person, like, what are they doing? And like, I've done this and I feel like I'm good at that, but like, actually, I have weaknesses here. And so during, I finished my master's in 2019. And then over the next year, someone headhunted me to join a writing group that was full of like people who were much more published than me and much better than me. And I spent a year I don't know if they knew I was doing it, but I was just very intensely studying all of them, and finding out what they were good at and asking them questions. And by the end of that year, I started getting pro-rate acceptances. And it's just, I've kind of gone from strength to strength. Like whatever I do, I'm always looking to improve. There will always be something to improve. It doesn't matter how long I live. I'll never be the best writer in the world. And I shouldn't be. There's always something to learn. And I think that really excites me, because there's always people doing new things. I see it every single day on Twitter. Someone will blow my mind with like a poem that's done something new, or a short story. And, oh, well, there you go. Well, you're sorted. Yeah. So what were the biggest challenges I encountered? That it kind of took over. It sort of had a life of its own. I really did think that maybe I would just write a sequel and that would be the end of it. And, at most it would just be another short story that I could submit or something. And then the second chapter was dealing with another character entirely. And by the end of that chapter, I thought, well, now I've accidentally introduced a third character, so maybe I'll just do him as well. And then maybe that'll be the end of it. And maybe it'll be like a novella and it will kind of stop there. And it didn't. It just went on. And the more I did it, the more I got excited about these characters and where it was going. They all felt very real. I was excited about finding different ways to structure things. There's a chapter that's just all of the different collective nouns for a group of sparrows. There's like a host, a quarrel, and a ubiquity, which I love collective nouns as well. I'm such a dork. I really like there's something really interesting about, like, sometimes I just go and look at lists of them just to see if it sparks anything. Humans are endlessly inventive. So it was just sort of expanding. And also the more it expanded, I'm sorry to say, there was a little tiny bit of, not spite, but pettiness, because my agent had said, well, I think it's fine as a short story, and I don't know if it, and I was like, well, is that what you think? Why don't I show you that you're wrong? Because I'm a terrible person. So
I think you're wonderful. I love it.
I just kept going until it eventually was starting to come to a natural end. But yeah, no, it's a very bad flaw, bad quality to want to be right all the time. So I should work on that maybe.
Well, I mean, you got a novel out of it, so I think that's a pretty good thing.
It's true, and I think we've come to an agreement, my agent and I, now that I should in fact just write whatever I want. I don't know if we've said it in that many words, but that's what's going to happen. So I already would like to know. To be fair, my next book, I'm caving to her, pun intended, because I had an idea about a weird cave that leads into the road into hell, and she got really excited, and I was like, I don't know if anyone's reading books about cave, like, is that something you can sell, like, are any editors? And she was just like, I don't know, why don't you just write it? I'm like, okay, well. Yeah, okay, so I think I'm going to write that this year. I've kind of outlined it already, and I kind of know how that's going to go, so I think that's going to be exciting.
I like this agent author relationship. She says something and you're like, hell with that. I'm going to do this. So it'll keep you busy. You'll be very prolific because of this agent.
I mean, I think I get away with quite a lot because my first drafts are usually really polished, so she doesn't have to do too much. And I also churn out books. Like I wrote The Immortal Game, the novel. Took me maybe 3 months.
Wow.
Like edited as well. So yeah, if I'm doing it that quickly, then she's not super mad because she's like, well, you just write something else. And I'm like, I will, you're right, you know me, fine. You've got me there.
I think that if you continue, you are on a path to success. You remind me a lot of writers that I knew like 15 years ago who are now fairly big deals. Just so I really hope, and I do think that it's going to work out well for you. And like 10 years from now, Lesley and I'll be like, oh, remember that time we got to interview Lindz, and now she's doing this. And
I mean, if that's true, even if I'm like having lunch with Kate Winslet every day, like I will still happily come on the Apex Pod. I will bring Kate with me. I'm sure she'd be happy to come.
Yeah, we could chill with Kate.
All right, so one more question. If you could write a story for any licensed IP, what would it be?
Oh, answer this one carefully. This could be an IP buyer, rights person.
See, it's difficult because there's definitely things I'm interested in. Like I like video games now, like particular series and things. I mean, I would write anything, I think. If given the opportunity, actually, like there's been things that I've been given the opportunity to write, and I've thought, I actually don't know the first thing about this, but you know, hey, Wikipedia is my friend. And I've gone off and done some learning. But I mean, yeah, that's a good point. I'm thinking of like some of the big kind of franchises. Like I've not done a lot of superhero stuff, but I'd really like to do something really dark like that, but not necessarily quite as tropey. Maybe something like one of the earlier Thors or Black Panther or something like that. That would be really fun. Yeah, something like Marvel or DC, maybe. There's been like some spin-offs and some stuff. Actually, I mean, honestly, if I had to write anything, like I would love to work with the guys who made Dark in 1899. Like,
yeah,
that's my jam.
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah, like I love Dark. I was obsessed with it. And my fiance also really likes it, but she was finding it quite confusing to like follow all the relation. And I was like, no, I have everything in my head. Like, we don't need the website. It's fine. And yeah, obviously 1899 got cancelled, which I was.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Yeah.
Netflix.
And they had like a 3-season arc ready to go, and now we may never know how it ended as well, which seems kind of, you know, it's the problem that you can kind of get into a show now, but you never quite know if it's going to stay the course. So there's been things that I haven't got around to yet that I'm thinking, I hope that maybe they'll bring out a second season before although I'm really behind on my TV because I work so much. So I think last year or the year before, I had started watching like Homeland for the first time, and I was like, oh, this is good. Why didn't no one tell? And everyone's like, okay, we all watched that like 15 years ago. I was like, oh, well, yeah.
You're talking, I'm the worst TV watcher. Like, I mean, honestly, like you're talking about these shows and I'm like, I've not seen it. I'm currently watching Dark Shadows from the 60s. So
nice.
Like, I'm literally the worst TV watcher ever.
I try, you know, I'm trying to do self-care and like not work quite as much, but that just means that now I'm consuming content, but in my head I'm labeling it as research, because also the wonderful thing about you know, having so many programs and things that and streaming services at your fingertips now means that you can watch a bunch of different things and dip in and dip out. There is something that I've been watching recently. I really liked the premise, and the first couple of episodes were really great, and then it completely went downhill. But it made me think, you know, if I was writing this, I would have gone in the other direction, and like maybe that's something to note for future reference, because I think one of the wonderful things about being a writer is if you don't like something that someone else has written or made, you can just write your own version of it, you know. That's always a joy. And speaking of, like, I really like Mass Effect, the video game, but I also really like the Great British Bake Off. And recently my friend was hit me up and said, I'm doing something for this anthology, and, you know, what do you have that's insane? And I said, well, I have a Mass Effect Great British Bake Off fic. Do you want that? And she was like, okay, yes. And it's completely insane, but I was like, no one else will ever buy this, so like, thank you for coming along and rescuing it. But yeah, you can do anything, you know. You can write Matrix, I don't know, One Direction fan fiction if you want. Actually, that's a great idea. Nobody steal that. I would like to write that.
I know we're running a little over, but I had to ask, have you considered video game writing? Like, I could see you writing something like a Kentucky Dark Zero or Hades, you know. Seems like something that would be up your alley.
Yeah, I would love that, actually. Like, I play a lot of like small indie games when I get the chance as well, like Oxenfree and stuff that's like kind of speculative, or like you might like the Kentucky game that you mentioned as well, and like Firewatch, or I also like, you know, the big RPGs like Mass Effect and various other things as well. But like, yeah, I've always wanted to do that. I think that would be really fun. There's something really amazingly immersive about that world. And again, it like kind of speaks to one of the things I love about Mass Effect is that, you know, you can really interact with your crewmates. You know, you can have these like romantic connections. It's been the one failing of the Mass Effect series. I don't want to talk about Andromeda, but the one failing of the Mass Effect series is that I could never have a Krogan partner. I just want to have like a Krogan boyfriend or girlfriend. It's just like, I just want a turtle boy. I want to fight beside a turtle boy, you know. Yeah, but no, that would be great. Like, if there's anyone out there who has enjoyed the chaos of this, then you know, hit me up. I will write for your video game. I will make time for that.
Well, talking with you has been an absolute joy. The Immortal Game is in Apex Magazine issue 135. It is only in the ebook right now, but will be up later, either this month or in early February, for everyone to read free online. It has been very nice speaking with you tonight, Lindz. It's delightful, and
yes,
but now
thank you.
It is past 2 a.m. for you.
It is. Well, I have to say thank you so much, because I've been submitting to Apex for a couple of years, and every time I felt that I was getting a little better and better, and it was always my white whale. And I was just, I don't think I've ever been so happy about anything as I was when I saw the acceptance come in. It was just like everything to me. So for that would have been amazing, but to like be here and chat with you is like fantastic. So thank you so much for having me. I did not care that it was 1 a.m. I didn't care one hoot. Happily do.
Well, thank you so much for being up at 1 a.m. At 1 a.m. I will be sleeping.
Yeah, me too.
And good luck tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
So.